"Happy birthday, Mama. It's time you finally had a real phone." That's what my daughter said to me just 12 days before the police put her in handcuffs right in front of my eyes. If someone told me that a birthday gift from my own flesh and blood would nearly cost me my home, my savings, and my freedom, I wouldn't have believed them. But that's exactly what happened. And I'm telling you this story because if it could happen to me, a retired teacher, a mother, someone who thought she raised her child right, it could happen to anyone. And it began long before that birthday. My name is Clara Mitchell. I'm 62 years old. I live alone in a modest brick house in Charlotte, North Carolina, the same house my husband Don and I bought almost 40 years ago when our daughter was still in diapers. Don passed away 6 years ago, and since then, I've learned how to live with silence, how to make coffee for one, how to sleep on one side of the bed, how to answer questions at family gatherings that start with, "So, how are you holding up?" I'm not helpless. I'm not senile. I'm not lost in the past. But I am careful, and I hold on to things that matter. Like my old phone. It was a battered flip phone, scratched and dull, with a loose hinge and buttons worn smooth by years of use. Don gave it to me the year before he died. He said, "This way I know you'll always answer when I call." After he was gone, that phone became more than a device. It was the last thing of his I used every single day. His number was still saved as speed dial 1. I never had the heart to delete it. A few months before my birthday, Sharon invited me to an important dinner party. Business people, friends of her boyfriend, the kind of event where everyone dressed carefully and spoke a little louder than necessary. I wore my nicest navy dress and carried my old phone in my purse, the way I always did. Halfway through the evening, my phone rang. I didn't even open it. Just the familiar sound was enough to make me smile for a moment before I silenced it. But Sharon noticed. She leaned toward me, her jaw tight. "Are you serious right now?" she hissed under her breath. "That thing is embarrassing. I'm 7. It's just my phone," I whispered back. "It still works." "You look ridiculous, Mama. This is an important dinner," I tried to explain. I told her it was a keepsake. I told her it was Don's. I told her some things weren't meant to be replaced. That's when she lost her temper. She waved her hand sharply, knocking my purse against the table. The phone slid out, hit the hardwood floor, and cracked open with a sound that still echoes in my ears. The screen went black. The hinge snapped. People stared. Someone laughed awkwardly. Sharon looked at the broken phone, then at me. "See? It was junk anyway." I was too stunned to argue. I picked up the pieces quietly, my hands shaking, and put them back in my purse. I told myself it was an accident. I told myself she didn't mean it. That's what mothers do. We soften the truth until it doesn't hurt so much. Now I know better. That broken phone was the first step. So when Sharon showed up on my doorstep on my birthday, holding a sleek white box and smiling that careful smile, I thought maybe she was making up for that night. "Happy birthday, Mama. It's time you finally had a real phone." She said it lightly, like a joke, like a kindness. I took the box because she was my daughter, because part of me still believed the best of her, because I didn't yet understand that replacing my old phone wasn't about helping me, it was about erasing something she couldn't control. She stayed for about an hour, helped me plug the phone in, showed me how to unlock it, swipe it, talk to it. She joked about reminders and calendars and how much easier life would be now. "You won't forget things anymore," she said, smiling. "This thing remembers everything." She left before the coffee cooled. The house felt different after she was gone. Quieter, heavier. I set the phone on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. I told myself I was being silly, that I was just tired, that grief does strange things to the mind. The next day, my grandson Marcus came by. He's 20, studying computer science, sharp in ways that remind me of his grandfather. I asked him to help me set up the phone properly. He took it in his hands, tapped through the settings, and within minutes, his face changed. "Grandma," he said carefully, "where did this phone come from?" "Your mother gave it to me," I said. He went quiet. Then he said words I will never forget. "Someone installed spyware on this phone. Before you ever turned it on." I felt the room tilt. He explained what it meant: monitoring, access, listening, watching. He spoke calmly, but I could hear the anger underneath. That night, I locked the phone in a drawer and sat alone in the living room, surrounded by memories I suddenly saw differently. The broken flip phone, Sharon's impatience, her sudden interest in my life. That was the moment I understood. The phone hadn't been a gift. It was a replacement. And everything after that was already part of the plan. 12 days later, I would watch my daughter cry and beg as the police led her away. But before that happened, I had to survive knowing the truth that the person who wanted control over my life wasn't a stranger. It was the child I raised. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like the video and comment where you're watching from. You might be surprised who's watching along near you. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, staring at that new phone like it was a bomb waiting to go off. The sunlight slanted through the blinds, catching dust motes in the air. It was quiet. Too quiet. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sharon's smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I kept hearing the crack of my old flip phone hitting the restaurant floor. The sound had been so sharp, so final, like a cord snapping. Now I couldn't stop thinking that maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe it had all been planned. A broken phone, a gift, a smile. That's when Marcus arrived. Every Sunday, like clockwork, he'd drop by around 9:30. He usually brought me a coffee from that fancy shop near campus, and I'd fix us breakfast grits and eggs or sometimes just toast if I wasn't feeling up to much. But today, I didn't even touch the griddle. "Morning, Grandma," he said, stepping into the kitchen with a grin. "I brought you a vanilla latte." I nodded and pointed to the table. "Sit down, baby. I need your help with something." "Eingredet Asenbressend." Marcus raised an eyebrow and looked at the phone. "That the one Mom gave you?" I nodded again. "She said it was time I joined the future." He chuckled. "About time. This thing's probably got more power than NASA used to send folks to the moon." He sat, pulled the phone toward him, and unlocked it with a few swift taps. I watched his fingers move like he was playing piano, deliberate, confident. But after just a minute, I noticed a shift in his posture. His back straightened, his brow furrowed. "Grandma," he said, voice low, "did this come sealed in the box?" "Yes," I said. "Brand new." Marcus didn't respond right away. He kept tapping, scrolling, eyes narrowing. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in from all sides. Finally, he exhaled and looked up at me. "This phone has surveillance software on it." I blinked. "What?" "Spyware," he said. "Professional grade. Hidden so deep most people wouldn't notice. It lets someone remotely access everything, your texts, emails, browser history. They can activate your microphone and camera without you knowing." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he said. "This is the kind of stuff we study in class, not amateur junk. Whoever installed it knew exactly what they were doing." I didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at the phone, sitting there like it was nothing more than plastic and glass. I wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe my daughter wouldn't do something like that. But deep down, I knew. I remembered how quickly she replaced my broken flip phone, how she'd barely flinched when it hit the floor, how her tone had shifted from annoyed to helpful in a blink. She'd planned this. "I think we should go to the police," Marcus said gently, "or at least talk to someone who understands this stuff." I nodded, slowly. My voice felt thick in my throat. "All right, let's go." Marcus drove us downtown to the Charlotte Police Department. It was a gray, boxy building that looked more like a tax office than a place where justice lived. We waited 15 minutes before a woman came out to greet us. "Detective Lisa Hart," she said, shaking our hands. She looked to be in her early 50s, with short, silver-streaked hair and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. There was no warmth in her expression, but no coldness either, just focus. Marcus explained everything. He walked her through the phone's settings, showed her the hidden apps, the permissions, the logs. Detective Hart took notes quietly, nodding along, occasionally asking a question that Marcus answered like he was in class. When they were done, she turned to me. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "I won't waste your time. This phone was configured before it ever got to you. That surveillance software didn't install itself." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" "It means someone wanted to keep tabs on you. And from what you've described, we're likely looking at a larger plan, maybe to gain access to your financial accounts, legal documents, even your house." I felt dizzy. "That's not possible. She's my daughter. Hart didn't flinch. And unfortunately, that's exactly what makes this kind of case so common. Family members know your habits, your routines, your weaknesses. Weaknesses? I repeated quietly. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. Do you have life insurance? A retirement account? Property? Yes, I said slowly. I've got a pension. The house is paid off. And a small life insurance policy. Then you have something to lose, she said. And that makes you a target. We left with instructions. Hart told me not to confront Sharon. Not yet. She said they needed more time to trace who set up the software, to check financial records, to see if any other documents had been changed. Act normal, she said. Let them think the plan is working. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Acting normal meant pretending I didn't know my own daughter might be trying to steal my life out from under me. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders, staring at the family photo on the mantel. Don, Sharon, and me, taken at a church picnic 20 years ago. Don had his arm around both of us, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. I looked at Sharon's face and wondered how long she'd been drifting from the girl I raised into the woman I barely recognized. Had it started after Don died? Or had I just missed the signs? I didn't cry. Not that night. There wasn't any room left in me for tears. Just quiet, heavy, endless quiet. And the first flicker of resolve. She'd underestimated me. They both had. The hardest part wasn't knowing. It was pretending not to. After that meeting with Detective Hart, every interaction with Sharon became an act. A performance I never imagined I'd have to give. I was no stranger to playing roles, mother, teacher, widow, but this was different. This was survival. Every word, every glance, every silence was a thread in the web I had to weave carefully, convincingly. I waited 3 days before calling Sharon. My hand shook as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mama," she said brightly. "How's the new phone treating you?" I took a breath, softened my voice. "I'm getting there. It's a lot to learn." "You'll figure it out," she said. "Did you try the calendar yet? I can come by and help if you want." "That might be nice," I replied. "I've been feeling a little off lately. Forgetful, tired." There was a beat of silence, just long enough to notice. "Well, that's not good," she said, her tone now dipped in something sugary and rehearsed. "Maybe it's time we started looking into some help, just in case." I let out a shaky laugh. That's what I was thinking too. And just like that, she took the bait. The next Saturday, she arrived with a tote bag and too much enthusiasm. "I brought some snacks," she said, placing a grocery bag on the counter. "Thought we could have a little mother-daughter day." End quote. She made tea while I sat at the kitchen table, watching her movements. Efficient, intentional, like she was walking through a checklist. She started asking questions: how I was sleeping, if I'd paid the water bill, when my last doctor's visit was. Innocent things, on the surface, but every one of them had weight. "You know, Mama," she said after pouring the tea, "there are some really nice retirement communities around here. Full service. They help with meds, meals, everything. Damon and I toured one for his aunt last year." I sipped my tea. "That so?" You'd have your own space. It wouldn't be like a nursing home. Just easier, safer." I looked down at my mug and let my hands tremble slightly. "It's been hard, Sharon. Sometimes I wake up and forget what day it is. I tried logging into my bank account last week and couldn't remember the password." Her eyes lit up just for a second before she blinked it away. "That's why we should start thinking ahead. Just in case. I mean, you've worked hard your whole life. Let someone take care of you for once." I nodded slowly, as if the idea were new. "I actually brought something to show you," she continued, pulling a folder from her bag. "It's nothing serious, just paperwork in case you ever want someone to help manage things." I stared at the folder. Plain blue cover, tabs inside. "Power of attorney," she said casually. "Just means I could help if anything ever happened. You'd still be in control." "It's some Breitman's." "Of course," I murmured. She slid it across the table. "No pressure, just read it when you're ready." I took the folder with both hands, careful not to let them shake too much. That night, I photographed every page and emailed them to Detective Hart from Marcus's laptop. She responded the next morning. "Exactly what we needed. Keep playing your part. I spent the next few days crafting a character, the forgetful old woman who couldn't keep up with modern life. I started pausing mid-sentence during phone calls with Sharon, asking her to repeat herself. I left the milk out overnight and mentioned it to her casually. I faked a missed doctor's appointment and said I just forgot. She didn't question it. She encouraged it. The transformation in her tone was chilling, less frustration, more condescension. She spoke slowly, gently, like I was already halfway gone. "I'll swing by tomorrow and help you organize those bills," she said one afternoon. "Wouldn't want you to fall behind." She was circling, tightening the noose, thinking I was too far gone to notice. On Wednesday, Marcus helped me set up an audio recorder in the kitchen just in case anything slipped during her visits. We also enabled a special trace app on the phone, courtesy of Detective Hart's tech team. Now, they could track what she was accessing remotely. The next time Sharon came by, she brought Damon. It was my first time meeting him in person. He was tall, too tan for February, with a gold watch and the kind of handshake that tries to squeeze trust out of your bones. "Pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Mitchell," he said with that oily smile. I nodded. "I've heard a lot about you." He chuckled. "All good things, I hope." We sat in the living room. Damon talked about his work in wealth management, using words like asset optimization and legacy preservation. I sipped my tea and nodded along like I understood half of it. Sharon stayed quiet for most of it, just smiling and touching his arm every so often. She looked relaxed, like she'd already won. When they left, I watched their car pull out of the driveway. My gut twisted. I didn't want to believe it, but it was all right there on paper, in their voices, in their eyes. They thought I was slipping. They thought I was ripe for the taking. But what they didn't know, what they still hadn't figured out, was that I had already stepped out of their trap, and I was setting one of my own. After Damon's visit, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Nothing had changed physically. The same couch Dawn and I bought on sale, the same framed photos along the hallway, the same faint creak in the floorboard near the kitchen, but something invisible had moved in. A presence. A pressure. Like I was being watched even when I knew the phone was sitting face down in the drawer. I kept reminding myself, the police were watching them now. Still, it's one thing to know you're part of a plan, and another to live inside it. Sharon started calling every day. Not long calls, just enough to check in, to confirm the story she wanted to believe. "How are you feeling today, Mama? Did you remember to take your vitamins? Have you thought more about that paperwork?" Her voice was soft, patient, almost tender, the kind of tone people use with children or the very old. It made my skin crawl. I answered carefully. I repeated myself sometimes. I paused mid-sentence like I'd lost my train of thought. I told her I'd misplaced my checkbook, then found it again 2 days later. Each small performance felt like a betrayal of myself, but I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't lying to hurt her. I was lying to survive. On Thursday afternoon, Detective Hart called. "We ran a preliminary background on Damon," she said. "It's not good." My hand tightened around the phone. "How not good?" "Fraud charges in Georgia. Elder financial exploitation. He served time, 18 months, different last name back then, but it's him." I closed my eyes. "So she knows," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Hart paused. "We don't know that for certain yet, but we do know he's been accessing your phone remotely, checking your location, opening apps. He's watching to see how far he can push." A chill ran through me. And Sharon? Her activity has increased. Calls to legal offices, searches related to guardianship and incapacity filings in North Carolina. I felt something hard settle in my chest, not panic this time, but clarity. "She's building a case," I said. "Yes," Hart replied, "and we need to let her think it's working." That night, I went down to the basement. I hadn't been down there in years. After Dawn died, I avoided it. Too many boxes, too many ghosts, but I needed to see something for myself. The basement smelled like dust and old cardboard. I flicked on the light and stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. Along the back wall were shelves. Don had built himself neat, sturdy, practical. That was him in a nutshell. I pulled down the old metal filing cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were folders Don and I had organized together years ago. Insurance policies, property records, retirement statements. Everything Sharon and Damon would want if they planned to take over my life. And there it was. A folder I didn't recognize. Plain manila, no label. My heart started pounding as I opened it. Inside were photocopies of my driver's license, bank summaries, a typed document titled Capacity Assessment, Preliminary Notes. My name was already filled in, so was my address. Boxes next to phrases like memory impairment, difficulty managing finances, confusion with dates. None of it was true. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Timeline. Stage 1. Establish confusion. Stage 2. POA. Stage 3. Guardianship filing. Stage 4. Asset access. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, the paper shaking in my hands. This wasn't just a bad idea. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a plan. A plan my daughter had helped write. I took photos of everything and sent them to Detective Hart. She replied within minutes. This confirms intent. You did the right thing. It's not a man. I didn't feel like I'd done anything right. I felt hollow. The next morning, Sharon showed up unannounced. I was in the area, she said breezily, stepping inside. Thought I'd check on you. She glanced around the living room like she was inspecting it, taking inventory. I smiled weakly. That's sweet of you. She sat beside me on the couch and took my hand. Mama, I've been worried. You seem different lately. I don't feel like myself, I admitted, lowering my eyes. Sometimes I think maybe I need help. Her grip tightened, just slightly. It's okay to admit that. She reached into her bag and pulled out another folder. I talked to a lawyer friend, she said. He specializes in family care situations. He thinks it would be good to get ahead of things. Get ahead, I repeated softly. Yes, before anything happens. This way, everything stays in the family. In the family. I looked at her face, the face I'd kissed goodnight for years, the face that used to light up when she ran toward me after school. I wondered when it had become this stranger's face. I'll think about it, I said. She smiled, relief flooding her features. That's all I ask. After she left, I didn't cry. I went to the kitchen, made myself a sandwich, and ate every bite. Because something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about stopping Sharon anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. They thought I was fading. They were wrong. I couldn't sleep the night Sharon handed me that second folder. I left it sitting on the dining table, untouched, like a snake coiled in plain sight. I made tea. Then another. I turned on the television but couldn't follow a single word. My thoughts kept circling the same question. How long had she been planning this? Had it started when Don passed away? When I sold his car? When I stopped driving at night? When I began asking Marcus for help with the internet? I kept thinking back to the last real holiday we'd spent together, Easter, 2 years ago. She brought store-bought potato salad and wore a blazer too expensive for someone constantly saying her spa was breaking even. She spent most of the afternoon on the phone in the hallway, laughing in a voice too loud, too fake. I'd chalked it up to stress. Now I saw it for what it was, distance. She'd already started leaving me behind. That morning, I called Marcus. Grandma? He said, half asleep. Everything okay? I need to do something, I said, and I need you to help me get it right. He was at my house within the hour, laptop in hand, wearing yesterday's hoodie and eyes still heavy with sleep. We sat in the kitchen with the phone between us. I want to give them what they want, I said. Marcus blinked. Excuse me? I want them to think they've won. I want them to believe I'm ready to hand it all over. Grandma, they're not going to stop, Marcus. Not until I sign that paper. So let them think I'm going to. He didn't speak for a long time. Just looked at me with those sharp eyes, so much like Dawn's. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Then we do this smart. I would now ham. He and Detective Hart coordinated a new level of surveillance, hidden microphones in the living room and kitchen. Marcus set up a remote access dashboard on his laptop to log every activity made through the phone. The spyware was still there, but now it worked both ways. We're not just watching them, Marcus said, typing furiously. We're baiting them. I began rehearsing my role. Every call from Sharon, I let my voice sound smaller. Every visit, I shuffled a little slower. I let bills pile up on purpose and casually mentioned I hadn't balanced my checkbook in a while. I've just been tired, sweetheart, I said one afternoon when she commented on my stack of unopened mail. Sometimes I look at all these numbers and my brain just floats off. She didn't question me. She smiled like a lion with dinner in sight. That weekend, she came back with Damon. Again, "I thought we could help you sort through some of this," she said, pulling off her coat like she owned the place. Damon gave me that same slick smile. "We're just here to support you, Miss Mitchell." I nodded, playing my part. "That's very kind." We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us, with envelopes and forms spread out like a war map. Damon took notes on a yellow legal pad while Sharon sorted my bills into neat little piles. "This," she said, holding up a notice from the insurance company, "is something we could automate. No need for you to worry about due dates." "Sounds lovely," I said, keeping my eyes soft. "Once we get the POA signed, I can link your account to ours and manage all this from my end. It'll be seamless." Damon chimed in. "It's all about peace of mind." I nodded. "You're both so good to me." Damon reached across the table and patted my hand. "You've worked hard your whole life. Let us take care of you now." It took everything in me not to flinch. Later, as they were leaving, Sharon paused at the door. "Think about signing soon, okay? The sooner we take care of this, the easier things will be." "I know," I said, lowering my eyes. "I will." That night, I emailed Hart. "Subject, they're closing in," she replied within minutes. Her team had captured clear audio of the conversation, and Damon's voice had been traced to another fraud case under review in Virginia. The evidence was stacking up fast, but we needed one more thing: intent to act. The next few days were a blur of carefully dropped comments. I told Sharon I was looking into retirement communities. I mentioned that the house felt too big. I wondered aloud whether I should simplify things before I start really forgetting. She couldn't hide her excitement. By Thursday, she texted, "Let's go see the lawyer next week. Just get it signed and off your mind. Love you." I stared at the screen, the words twisting in my gut. She was always so quick to say she loved me, just never quick to show it when it counted. That night, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the reflection of myself in the microwave door. I barely recognized the woman looking back, my shoulders slouched from the weight of pretending, my face worn down by betrayal and strategy. But my eyes, they were still sharp, still mine, and I made myself a promise, right then and there. I would see this through. I would let them believe they'd won, and then I'd be the one standing while they fell apart. The morning of the lawyer meeting arrived with cold air and quiet skies. It was one of those early spring days in Charlotte where winter still clung to the breeze and the sun rose reluctantly behind pale clouds. I woke up before dawn, not because I was nervous, but because I needed to be still, to center myself. This was it. The trap was set. All I had to do now was walk into it with my head held high and my heart guarded. I made oatmeal, toasted a slice of rye bread, sat by the kitchen window with a blanket over my shoulders, and listened to the world waking up, birds chirping, a distant garbage truck rumbling down the street, my neighbor's dog barking at shadows. Normal things, familiar things. I clung to them. At 9:14 a.m., Sharon pulled into my driveway in her silver BMW. She stepped out wearing a beige pantsuit and too much perfume. She looked polished, professional, like someone with a plan and a timeline. "Ready to get this over with?" she said, holding the car door open for me. I gave her my best tired smile. Ready as I'll ever be. We drove in silence most of the way. She hummed occasionally to a radio commercial. My hands rested on my lap, fingers curled slightly, hiding the fact that they weren't shaking. Not today. The law office was in a 2-story building near downtown, tucked between a dentist's office and a frozen yogurt place. I wondered how many other families had come here thinking they were doing the right thing only to be hollowed out, piece by legal piece. Inside, we were greeted by a receptionist with red glasses and a stiff smile. "Mr. Lawson will be right with you," she said. A few minutes later, a man in a navy suit stepped into the lobby. He had a short beard, thinning hair, and the kind of handshake that tried too hard to reassure. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said. "I'm Greg Lawson. A pleasure to meet you." He led us into a conference room with glass walls and a large wooden table. On it sat a neat stack of documents, each one a doorway into the life I'd spent decades building. Sharon sat beside me, pulling the papers closer. "It's all here, Mama. Power of attorney, healthcare directives, bank authorizations, just the basics. You'll still be in control of everything, but if something happens, I'll be able to help." I nodded, letting my hand rest lightly on the pen. Mr. Lawson, I said, my voice soft, could you walk me through exactly what this means? He launched into a well-practiced explanation, legal language wrapped in gentle terms. Sharon nodded along, tapping her nails on the table, confident, composed. I waited. And when he was done, I asked the question I'd been waiting weeks to say. And what happens if someone uses this to declare I'm mentally unfit? The room went still. Mr. Lawson blinked. I suppose in that case. Sharon cut in, voice rising just enough to cover the tension. Mama, no one's saying that. We're just trying to make things easier. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And I smiled. Easier for who? Before she could answer, the door opened. Detective Lisa Hart stepped into the room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Sharon Mitchell, Hart said calmly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, forgery, and attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Sharon shot to her feet. What? No! Mama, what is this? I stayed seated. I know everything, Sharon, I said. The documents, the recordings, the plan. I've known for weeks. Her face crumpled. You don't understand. Damon, he said he promised. You promised me, I interrupted, voice steady. You promised to love me, to protect me. But I was only worth something to you when I looked like I couldn't fight back. The officers moved toward her. She backed away, tears falling fast now, no longer crocodile but real panic. Fear, or maybe just the shock of a plan unraveling. Mama, please. I'm your daughter. I nodded. You were. They placed her in handcuffs. Damon, Hart informed me later, was arrested an hour earlier outside his apartment. He'd packed a suitcase and booked a one-way flight to Tampa. Cowards always run when the mask comes off. Back in the conference room, Mr. Lawson was silent. He looked like he wanted to vanish. I stood slowly, reached for my purse. No papers today, Mr. Lawson, I said. I believe I'll keep my name and assets in my own hands. He didn't argue. I walked out of that office feeling older than I had that morning, but lighter too, as if shedding something I didn't realize I'd been carrying. In the parking lot, the wind picked up, cold, honest. I pulled my coat tighter and looked up at the sky. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the quiet after a storm. The days after Sharon's arrest unfolded in a strange silence. Not the quiet of peace, but the thick, humming quiet that comes after a thunderstorm, the kind of silence that leaves behind broken branches and puddles that reflect the wreckage. I stayed home mostly, answered a few calls from relatives, cousins who'd heard something through the grapevine, an old church friend who left a hesitant voicemail. Most people didn't know the details yet. Sharon's name hadn't hit the papers. But whispers move fast in a city like Charlotte. Detective Hart called me 2 days later. We've got Damon's confession on record, she said. He folded fast, gave us everything, timelines, screenshots, even a private message thread between him and Sharon. She was the architect. He was just the tool. I nodded, gripping the phone tighter. They'll both be charged, Hart continued. You've done everything right. You've protected yourself, but you should know. Sharon's lawyer is likely to push for a plea deal. Mental health angle. Claims of stress, coercion, grief. I sat down slowly in the chair near the window, the same one Dawn used to read in every morning. She buried her father 6 years ago, I said softly. That grief ship sailed long before she planned this. I agree, Hart replied. But the courts might not. I'll keep you posted. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't feel victory. Not yet. I felt tired. I went into the kitchen and pulled a box from the cupboard. Inside were old family photos, holidays, school concerts, birthdays. There was one of Sharon when she was 8 years old, holding a handmade card that said "Best Mom Ever" in glitter and purple crayon. What happened to that girl? That night, I couldn't sleep again. My mind kept drifting to memories, rewinding and rewatching the past like an old film reel. But there was one moment I kept returning to. The funeral. Dawn's funeral. Sharon hadn't cried. Not once. She gave a short, polite eulogy, nodded at people, hugged the right relatives, but her eyes stayed dry. I'd thought she was just trying to stay strong for me. Now I wondered if she had already disconnected. From me. From him. From everything real? A knock at the door startled me the next morning. It was Marcus. He stood there holding 2 coffees and a manila envelope. "Don't worry," he said, stepping inside. "This one isn't full of forged documents." I smiled faintly and took the coffee. "Thank you, baby." He sat down and placed the envelope on the table. "I wanted to show you something," he said. "Something I found on Damon's cloud backup. The police gave me limited access. Hart thought it might help you get closure." Inside were printed messages. Some from Sharon, some from Damon. Some were dated nearly a year ago. The tone was unmistakable, cold, calculating. They talked about my bank account like it was a prize to win, about navigating the guardianship path, about how to accelerate confusion. My breath caught on one particular line. "She's not the same since Dad died. She's lonely, soft. This is the window." Lonely, soft, not broken, not vulnerable. Just alone. I felt my stomach twist. Not with rage, but with something deeper. Regret. Not because I trusted her, but because I hadn't seen what she'd become. I looked up at Marcus, his eyes steady and full of quiet fury. "Did you know?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, not until the phone. I thought she was stressed, maybe a little too into Damon. But this?" He gestured to the papers. "This is betrayal." We sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small box. "I brought you something." Inside was a phone. Not a smartphone. Not a tablet. A flip phone. Simple, black, familiar. "I found the exact model Grandpa gave you," Marcus said. "It's refurbished, but it works." I felt tears spring up before I could stop them. "I figured," he added, "maybe some things are worth keeping." I reached out, touched the phone, and for a moment, felt the past meet the present. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Later that night, I sat on the porch with that flip phone in my lap. The new smartphone, the one Sharon gave me, was locked in a drawer. It buzzed once or twice with messages I didn't check. I didn't need to anymore. I looked up at the stars. The storm was over, but healing was just beginning. It was the quiet things that changed first. The way I held the phone again, now that it wasn't watching me. The way I walked through the house, no longer suspicious of the walls. The way I made coffee in the morning, humming softly to myself, like I had something solid beneath me again. But the world outside hadn't changed just because mine had. 3 days after Marcus brought me the flip phone, I received a letter. Official looking. From a law firm downtown. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a stamped envelope. Petition for conservatorship withdrawal. Filed by Sharon Mitchell. Status. Pending court review. She was pulling back. Or maybe she was being advised to. I brought the letter to the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. The words swam in and out of focus. I imagined Sharon sitting in a cold conference room somewhere, her lawyer telling her what to say, how to salvage what was left of her life. A part of me should have felt relief. Another part felt empty, because even in retreat, she hadn't called, hadn't written, hadn't said sorry. The following day, I met with Detective Hart one final time. "This is standard," she explained, tapping the paper. "Now that charges have been filed and the surveillance evidence is solid, their legal team is shifting to damage control. Pulling back from the conservatorship petition is just strategy. It doesn't change what they tried to do." "I know," I said. "It just stings." She nodded slowly. "It will for a while. That's crime." We sat in her office with the blinds half drawn, the afternoon sun casting long lines across the floor. On the wall behind her desk was a faded photograph of her and a teenage boy, her son, she'd told me once. Lost in a car accident a decade ago. That photo had been there every time I visited, but today I saw it differently. Loss leaves a mark. On everyone. Hart leaned forward. "You've been incredibly strong, Mrs. Mitchell. Most people never come forward, or they do, but too late." "Is create." I let out a quiet breath. I didn't want to be a victim. "You're not," she said. "You're a survivor." On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store for the first time in weeks. The cashier, a young woman with pink braids and kind eyes, smiled at me. "Haven't seen you in a while, Miss Clara." I smiled back. "Had a few things to take care of." She bagged my groceries gently like the eggs mattered. It was a small kindness, but it landed deep. At home, I put the groceries away, turned on the radio, and let the classical music fill the kitchen. Bach, I think, something slow and elegant. I didn't know the name, but it felt familiar, like something Dawn would have hummed while fixing the porch screen. I stood there, letting the music wash over me. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel proud. I had been targeted, lied to, manipulated. But I hadn't disappeared. That night, Marcus stopped by again, this time with his girlfriend, Elena. She brought homemade cookies and asked gentle questions about the garden I used to keep. I told them about the hydrangeas and the lavender, about Dawn's old tomato plants and the stubborn squirrel who used to dig up the bulbs. They laughed, and for a moment, it felt like any ordinary evening. When they left, Marcus hugged me tightly. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "I will be." End quote. He hesitated, then added, "Mom's arraignment is next week." I didn't answer. I just looked out at the darkening sky. Later that night, I sat at my desk with a pen and a sheet of heavy stationery. For the first time in years, I began to write a letter. "Dear Sharon, I don't know who you are anymore, but I know who I am. And I know I deserve better than this. I don't write to forgive you, not yet. I don't write to curse you either. I write because I have to leave something behind that's honest. Something that says, I saw you, I loved you, and I survived you. I don't know what happens next. Maybe nothing. But I needed you to know. I'm still here. Still whole. Still me. Mama, I didn't seal the letter. I didn't even know if I would mail it. But writing it felt like lighting a candle in a dark room. It reminded me that, no matter how cruel the betrayal, the truth still had a voice. And I wasn't afraid to use it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor wax. I hadn't planned to go. Hart said I didn't need to be there. Sharon's arraignment would be routine. Charges read aloud, bail conditions set, a defense lawyer doing their best to sound regretful and hopeful at the same time. But that morning, I woke up early, dressed in my navy blue suit, the same one I wore to Dawn's funeral, and drove myself downtown. I didn't go for drama. I went for clarity. There were maybe 12 people in the courtroom when I arrived. A few bored reporters, a couple of bailiffs, the judge, a man with kind eyes and a sharp voice. I took a seat in the back row and folded my hands in my lap. Sharon entered from the side. She was still beautiful, hair pinned neatly, lips glossed, clothes simple but expensive. But there was a tightness in her eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there before. She didn't see me at first. Then she did. Our eyes met across the room, and something flickered in her expression. Shock, shame, something deeper I couldn't name. She looked away. The hearing began. The charges were read one by one: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted forgery. Her lawyer pled not guilty on her behalf. I sat still as stone. The judge spoke about pre-trial release, conditions, timelines. None of it mattered. Not in that moment. What mattered was the silence between us, the weight of everything unspoken. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Sharon's lawyer shook his head, but Sharon stood up anyway. "Your Honor," she said, voice wavering, "may I speak?" The judge paused, then nodded. Briefly. Sharon turned slowly and looked at me. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I know what I did. I know what I planned. I can't explain it. I can't excuse it. All I can say is, I lost myself. I thought I was doing what needed to be done, but I see now how far I went. I hurt my mother. I betrayed her." She took a breath. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life." The room was silent. Even the reporter stopped typing. I didn't cry. Not then. But I nodded. Just once. Just enough to say, "I heard you." That was all. After the hearing, I walked out into the morning light. The city bustled around me, oblivious. Horns honked. People laughed into phones. Somewhere a construction crew was drilling into concrete. Life kept going. I found a bench nearby and sat down. 10 minutes later, Marcus appeared. "You went," he said, not surprised. "I did." He sat beside me, handed me a bottle of water. We didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "Do you believe her?" "I believe she's sorry," I said. "I don't know if she's sorry enough." He nodded. "She'll probably take a deal," he added. "Probation, restitution, maybe some counseling." "I see it." "And then what?" "She'll live," he said. "And so will you." That evening, I returned home to find a letter in the mailbox. From Sharon. I opened it at the kitchen table. Mama, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to, but I wanted you to know I meant what I said in court. I don't know who I became. I thought I was helping. Then I thought I was surviving. Then I stopped thinking altogether. I let someone else's ambition become my own. And I nearly destroyed the only person who ever truly loved me. I'm so sorry. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if there's ever a day you need help planting something in the garden, I'll be there. If there's ever a time you want to yell at me, I'll be there. If there's ever a second you think about me and it doesn't hurt, I hope I'll be there. I don't deserve grace, but I hope I haven't lost you forever. Sharon. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same drawer where Dawn's wedding ring now lived. Then I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on. Some wounds don't heal with time. Some require choosing to keep walking, even when the path is uneven. But I was walking, and I wasn't alone. Spring arrived gently that year. The trees bloomed late, but when they did, it was with a kind of quiet insistence, pale pink blossoms unfolding without fanfare, just the slow, steady rhythm of life finding its way forward. I started gardening again. Not the way I used to, with diagrams and fertilizer schedules and early morning hose sprays. No, this was simpler, slower. I bought a few seed packets, zinnias, snapdragons, tomatoes. I pulled on Dawn's old gardening gloves, still too big for my hands, and let the dirt remind me what steady felt like. Marcus helped me clean out the shed. Elena brought over a bird feeder shaped like a tiny farmhouse. The squirrels tried to steal from it, of course, but I didn't mind. It gave me something to shake my fist at in the mornings. Little things. That's what healing looked like now. One afternoon in April, I was kneeling beside the lavender bed when I heard a familiar voice behind me. You're planting too close together. Those roots'll choke each other. I turned slowly. Sharon stood at the edge of the yard, holding a paper bag with both hands. She wore jeans and an old sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years, one I'd given her for college. Her hair was tied back, and she looked small, not frail, just quiet. I figured I'd bring by some compost, she said. From the co-op. You always said good dirt made all the difference. I stood, brushing my hands off on my pants. That was your father's rule, actually. She smiled faintly. Then I guess it's gospel. We stood there, 5 feet apart, with a garden bed between us. You want some water? I asked. She nodded. Sure. In the kitchen, I poured us each a glass. She sat at the table like it was foreign territory, like she didn't quite know where to place her hands. I noticed she hadn't brought her phone. I also noticed the faint red mark around her wrist where a court-ordered ankle monitor had been just days ago. How's work? I asked, surprising us both. She hesitated. Gone. I closed the spa. Damon, he left, took the lease money and vanished. I nodded. Probably for the best. I've been staying with a friend, doing temp work, trying to keep my head down. The silence stretched. Then she reached into the paper bag and pulled out a small jar. I found this, she said, in one of the old boxes from college. It's yours. I opened it. Homemade peach jam. My label, in my handwriting. I took it from the pantry before I moved out, Sharon admitted. I don't know why. Just wanted to have something that tasted like home. I set it gently on the table. It's probably gone bad. Probably. We both laughed, and the sound startled us. It was the first shared laugh in over a year. After a moment, Sharon's expression turned solemn. I don't expect things to go back, she said. I know what I did. I know what I risked. And I know I broke something in you I may never fix. I looked at her, really looked. And I saw not just my daughter but also the space between us. The gap shaped by greed, fear, and silence. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly. Not yet, she nodded. That's fair. But I also don't want to carry this forever, I added. It's too heavy, and it keeps me from planting things. A pause. Maybe, I said slowly, you can help me with the tomatoes this year. Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded once. No words, just a quiet agreement. Later that evening, after she'd left, I sat on the porch with a warm mug of tea and the birds chattering in the trees. I didn't trust Sharon again. Not yet. But I saw the beginning of something, not a reconciliation, not exactly. A truce. A fragile, living thing. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks unfolded like a patchwork quilt, uneven, stitched with strange textures, but warmer than I expected. Sharon began stopping by once a week, never unannounced, always cautious. Sometimes she brought fresh basil from the co-op, other times a bag of mulch or a secondhand gardening book. She never asked to come inside unless I invited her, and I didn't always. But when I did, it was because something inside me softened, not forgotten, not forgiven, but open enough to let her sit on the porch and sip sweet tea without having to explain every breath. The garden thrived. Tomatoes climbed their cages like they remembered how. The lavender took hold again. The hydrangeas began to bud. In late May, I woke early one Saturday to find Sharon already in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, hands muddy to the elbows, humming an old church tune. I watched her for a long moment from the kitchen window, and I let myself remember who she used to be. That Sunday, I went to church for the first time in over a year. The sanctuary looked the same, worn pews, stained glass windows catching the morning light, Sister Jean at the organ in her Sunday lavender. People whispered when I walked in, and some smiled with quiet warmth. I sat in the fourth row, alone. The sermon that day was about grace, not the soft kind, but the painful kind. The kind that costs something. The kind you give not because someone deserves it, but because holding on to the hurt will destroy you first. After service, Pastor Whitmore found me by the vestibule. "You're looking stronger, Clara." "Trying to be," I said. He looked at me a moment. "Sometimes forgiveness starts in the hands, before it makes its way to the heart." I didn't reply, but I understood. That week, I invited Sharon to help me transplant the cucumbers. It was the hardest thing I'd done since the trial. And she came. No fanfare, no expectations. She brought gloves and a kneeling mat and didn't try to fill the silence with apologies. That mattered. Later, while we rested under the oak tree, Sharon spoke quietly. "I found a counselor," she said. "Someone who works with women coming out of abusive partnerships." I turned to look at her. "Are you saying Damon?" She nodded. "It wasn't just emotional manipulation, Mama. There were times. He hurt me. Not bruises, not the kind people see, but he made me feel small, dependent, like I couldn't breathe unless he allowed it." I sat with that for a long time. "I didn't tell you that to excuse what I did," she added quickly. "I told you because it's part of why I stopped seeing myself." I reached for my tea, the glass sweating in my hand. "I never thought you'd fall for someone like him," I said honestly. "Neither did I." We didn't cry. There wasn't drama, just the soft rustle of wind in the tree above us, and the quiet thud of a lemon dropping from the neighbor's tree into my yard. She laughed. "Still stealing their fruit, huh?" I smiled. I like to think the tree knows where it belongs. Later that evening, after she left, I pulled out a notebook and began to write not a journal, not a letter, just thoughts. Lines about roots and redemption, about how the deepest healing comes not with time, but with tending. That night, I placed that notebook on the windowsill next to the flip phone and the letter she had written weeks ago. All three sat together like layers of the same story. Broken, mended, growing. June brought with it the kind of southern heat that settles into your bones and stays there. The days stretched long and heavy. I woke early to tend the garden before the sun climbed too high. Sharon came most Tuesdays now, always bringing something: fresh eggs from the market, a bundle of wildflowers, once even a second-hand wind chime shaped like a butterfly. She never asked for anything in return. One afternoon, I stood watching her from the kitchen, the way she carefully trimmed dead blooms from the zinnias. I noticed how her shoulders relaxed more each week, how she no longer flinched at sudden noises. She was healing, too, but the scars were still there for both of us. That evening, after watering the garden, she lingered on the porch, hesitant. "I got a job offer," she said quietly, rocking slowly on the porch swing. "It's not much. Front desk at a physical therapy clinic, but it's steady and honest." I nodded, pouring us iced tea. "That sounds like a good step." She stared into her glass. "It's out in Asheville, about 2 hours away." I stopped mid-pour. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," she added quickly. "Part of me thought, maybe you'd be relieved if I left." I sat beside her, the fan humming softly overhead. I wouldn't call it relief, I said, but I also wouldn't stop you. Sharon looked away, toward the edge of the yard where Don's old tool shed still stood, half covered in ivy. I'm not running, she said. Not this time. I know. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt like a conversation in itself. She left just before sunset, promising to stop by next week to say goodbye. After she drove off, I walked into the backyard, past the lavender and cucumbers, and stood under the old oak tree. I thought about what it meant to let go, not out of anger, but out of trust. I'd spent so long holding on to hurt, gripping it like it was the last thing tying me to Dawn, to motherhood, to something solid. But maybe letting Sharon go now, like this whole, honest, trying wasn't abandonment. Maybe it was love, grown up and weathered, and finally ready to stop bleeding. The next Sunday, Marcus came over. She told me about the move, he said, sipping lemonade. You okay? I will be, I answered. She's scared, he said, but determined. She always was stubborn. He smiled. Like someone else I know. We walked the garden together, and I showed him the first blush of red on the tomato vines. He took photos, said Elena wanted to make sauce from scratch this year. You've taught her well, I said. He looked at me. So have you. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote one simple line. Love, when tested, doesn't always break. Sometimes it bends just far enough to grow in a new direction. The morning Sharon left for Asheville, the sky was pale and cloudless, one of those early summer days that felt more like a blank page than a farewell. She didn't make a fuss. No suitcases lined the porch, no last-minute tears or dramatic hugs. Just a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a mason jar of iced coffee in hand. I stood on the front steps, watching as she adjusted the rearview mirror of the used Corolla she'd bought with what little savings she had left. She looked over at me, hair pulled back, face calm, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the girl I used to drive to school every morning. Nervous, hopeful, trying not to show either. You sure you don't want to come by for breakfast first? I asked. She smiled faintly. If I stay longer, I'll second-guess everything. I nodded, stepping closer. Then let me say this now. She stood still. I'm proud of you, I said. Not for what you did, but for who you're trying to become. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Thanks, Mama. She reached out, hesitated, then hugged me. Not the stiff, awkward kind we'd exchanged in recent months, but the full-bodied, breathing-in kind. The kind that says, I'm still here. Even after everything. I held her tighter than I meant to, and then I let go. She pulled away, started the car, and backed out of the driveway. No music, no wave. Just a slow roll into something new. I stood there long after the car disappeared around the corner. Later that day, I found a note tucked beneath the wind chime she'd hung weeks earlier. Mama, I don't know if I'll ever make this right, but I'm not going to stop trying. Thank you for giving me a chance to begin again. I love you. Sharon. I folded the note and placed it with the others in the drawer beside the flip phone and the jam jar. A quiet altar to survival. The next week passed in a different rhythm. No calls. No visits. Just stillness. I filled my time with gardening, reading, small trips to the market. The quiet didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. Marcus stopped by one evening, his arms full of ingredients for lasagna. He and Elena were celebrating their anniversary and insisted on cooking for me. Over dinner, he asked, How are you, really? I set down my fork and looked at him. I'm not waiting anymore, I said. Not for apologies, not for explanations. I'm living. He raised his glass. To that. As the night deepened and laughter filled the kitchen, I realized something. My world hadn't shrunk from what happened. It had shifted, redefined itself. The daughter who betrayed me was not the same woman planting zinnias beside me. And the woman I was a year ago, the one who held her pain like armor, was not the same woman now choosing softness without fear. I had been broken, but not buried. And like the garden, I had found a way to rise again. July arrived with fireworks and humidity so thick it clung to your skin like guilt. The town buzzed with barbecues, flags, and neighbors comparing potato salad recipes. I received 3 invitations for the 4th of July, but chose to stay home, not out of sadness, but contentment. My home, my garden, my space, I no longer felt the need to perform for anyone. Around 9 that evening, I pulled a lawn chair onto the porch and watched the bursts of color light up the sky beyond the rooftops. Somewhere nearby, a radio played a scratchy version of America the Beautiful. As I sipped iced tea, the phone rang. Not the flip phone, the house line. Only 3 people had that number. I answered slowly. Mama? Sharon's voice was small, unsure. I just wanted to say, I watched the fireworks tonight from my porch. They weren't much, but they reminded me of when we used to drive out to the lake and park on the hood of the car. Remember? I smiled, the memory warm and sharp all at once. You used to bring a blanket and eat watermelon until your fingers were sticky, I said. She laughed. And you'd yell if I spit seeds at Marcus. I'm don't filled. We stayed on the line a while longer. Not saying much, just being. After she hung up, I stayed outside until the last spark faded. The next morning, I received a package. No return address. Just a small box tied with twine. Inside was a photo frame, wooden, hand-painted. The photo inside was old, clearly scanned and reprinted. Dawn and I at the lake. Sharon, maybe 10 years old, sitting between us, beaming, a slice of watermelon in her hands. Tucked behind the frame was a note. Some memories deserve more than regret. Love, always. S. I set the frame on the mantel. Later that week, I found myself writing again. Not just in the notebook, but letters. To old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. To the neighbor whose dog barked every morning. Even one to a local senior center, offering to volunteer with the gardening club. I wasn't rebuilding. I was repurposing. Reclaiming joy in small doses. One afternoon, I came across a woman at the market struggling to count coins at the register. Her hands trembled, and her eyes darted with embarrassment. I stepped forward, smiled, and quietly paid the difference. She didn't thank me. She just exhaled. And that was enough. That evening, Marcus called. Elena wants to host a late summer dinner, he said. She asked if you'd help with the menu. I agreed. When I hung up, I sat in the kitchen with the soft clink of ice in my glass and realized I hadn't thought about Sharon's betrayal in over 3 days. It no longer sat in the center of my life. It had become a room in the house, not the whole structure. And that, I thought, is how you know you're healing. By August, the garden was heavy with life. Tomatoes ripened faster than I could pick them. The hydrangeas had reached full bloom, their heads drooping under the weight of late summer heat. Bees buzzed lazily through lavender and basil. Even the stubborn squirrel seemed to move more slowly, drunk on the scent of rosemary and sun. Sharon hadn't called again. She hadn't needed to. Something unspoken had settled between us, an understanding that healing doesn't always come in conversation, but in continuity. She was living her life. I was living mine. And for the first time in years, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like choice. Elena's late summer dinner was scheduled for the 3rd Saturday in August. She and Marcus had worked on it for weeks. A backyard gathering, string lights, homemade pasta, and a playlist that included everything from Marvin Gaye to Fleetwood Mac. Just a few friends, Marcus had said. When I arrived, the table was already set, mason jars of lemonade, linen napkins, wildflowers in old wine bottles. Elena greeted me with flour on her cheek and a kiss on mine. You brought the rosemary focaccia? She asked, grinning. Still warm, I replied, holding out the basket. The evening unfolded like a soft melody. Neighbors wandered in with covered dishes. Someone brought a guitar. Children ran barefoot in the grass. For a while, I sat under the fairy lights and watched it all, this younger generation, building their own traditions, laughing easily, holding hands without apology. At some point, Marcus sat beside me, holding 2 bowls of homemade peach cobbler. Think we did all right? He asked. I took a bite and nodded. Your grandfather would have had 3rds. He smiled. We miss him. I know, I said. Me too. As the night deepened, people began to say their goodbyes. I stood with Marcus near the gate when a familiar car pulled up slowly beside the curb. It was Sharon. She stepped out hesitantly, holding a small covered dish. I know I wasn't invited, she said. But Marcus mentioned it, and She looked at me. I looked at Marcus. He simply smiled and walked away. Sharon held out the dish. Blueberry cobbler, it's not much. I took it. He would have gone for seconds. We stood there in the soft hum of the gathering behind us. You want to come in? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. We sat side by side at a corner table, the music low, the conversation around us warm and easy. She didn't try to explain herself. I didn't try to rewrite the past. We just were. Later, as people began to leave, Sharon helped me gather empty glasses and tuck napkins into a laundry basket. It was the kind of quiet work we used to do without thinking, before things had names like betrayal and court orders. She looked at me suddenly, her eyes glassy. I thought I'd lost all of this. You did, I said gently. But some things don't stay lost forever. She looked down, nodded. As I gathered my things to leave, she placed a hand on my arm. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't say anything, but I didn't pull away. That night I drove home with the window down, the air thick with jasmine and summer's end. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. Forgiveness wasn't a single door swinging open. It was a path, uneven, long, and I was walking it, one quiet step at a time. The first rain of September came without warning. One moment the sky was bright and wide, and the next it was dark and bruised, unleashing a downpour that washed the dust from every rooftop in Charlotte. I stood on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the rain turn my walkway into a shallow stream. That afternoon, Sharon called. Got caught in it, she said, laughing softly. Looked like a drowned cat walking into the clinic. How's the job? I asked, stirring honey into my tea. It's good, she said. Honest. I come home tired in the right ways. There was a pause on the line. And you? She asked. I've been thinking of repainting the kitchen. Something lighter, like that yellow you liked in the magazine. I smiled, surprised. You remembered that? I remembered a lot more than I thought I did. We talked a little longer about rain and recipes and the ridiculous price of olive oil. It was ordinary and beautiful. That evening, I opened the hallway closet and pulled out the old photo albums. I hadn't touched them since Dawn passed. I sat on the living room floor, cross-legged like a child, and flipped through pages of time. There were birthdays with bad haircuts, Thanksgivings with too much pie, beach trips with sunburned noses. There was a photo of Sharon at 5 years old, asleep on Dawn's chest in the recliner. I ran my fingers over the image, tears prickling behind my eyes. So much had happened between then and now, but some pieces of love, no matter how deeply buried, don't rot. They root. Later that week, Sharon drove down to visit for a Sunday lunch. She brought deviled eggs, the good kind, with paprika and dill. We set the table together, the way we used to. I pulled out Dawn's old serving tray, the one with the chipped corner, and laid out the lemon bars I'd baked the night before. Still your favorite? I asked as she reached for one. She grinned. Always. Over lunch, we talked about nothing and everything. After we cleared the dishes, she stood in the kitchen doorway and said, I want to tell Marcus the truth, all of it, the part I never told him. I looked up from the sink. About Damon? She nodded. About me. What I allowed. What I chose. I dried my hands on a towel. You sure? Yes, she said, eyes steady. Because I don't want to build anything else on silence. End quote. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't see the daughter who betrayed me. I saw the woman fighting to redeem herself. You've come a long way, I said quietly. I'm still walking, she replied. I nodded. We both are. That night, I wrote another page in my notebook. Redemption isn't about erasing what's broken. It's about showing up anyway, hands dirty, voice shaking, and choosing to plant something better. The next Sunday, Marcus came to the house alone. He was quieter than usual, the way people are when they're carrying something fragile in their chest. He hugged me longer than he typically did and asked for lemonade without his usual sarcasm about old lady drinks. We sat on the porch, the late afternoon sun falling in golden stripes across the wooden floorboards. I saw her, he said eventually. I didn't need to ask who. She told me everything, he continued, voice low. The spyware, the papers, the conversations with Damon. All of it. I nodded, waiting. At first I didn't know what to say. I mean, part of me wanted to yell, to walk away. But then, he paused, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. Then I remembered what you said. That she was still my mother. That people can lose themselves. He looked over at me. She said she's still ashamed. That she probably always will be. I reached out, placed a hand on his. And what did you say? He smiled faintly. I said that shame's a beginning, not an ending. We sat in silence for a while, letting the wind pass through the trees, rustling the sweet gum leaves above us. She's moving forward, he added, but she said she'll keep one seat at the table open for the rest of us, just in case. The next day, I received a letter. Handwritten, no envelope. It was from Damon. He was writing from a correctional facility in Virginia, where he'd been transferred on older charges. The letter was short. Clara, I know no apology will ever be enough. I took advantage of your kindness, your grief, your silence, and I want you to know I lost something too. Not your money, not your house. I lost the mirror, the one that let me see myself as someone good. Maybe that's justice. Or maybe it's just the beginning of a longer sentence. I hope you grow tomatoes forever. D. 10. When ringsing, I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I burned it in the fireplace. Not out of anger, but because some stories don't deserve to stay on the shelf. That evening, I called Sharon. Marcus told me, I said. There was a pause. Are you okay? I am, I replied, and I want you to know what you did for him. That mattered. I just want to keep showing up, she said, even if it's quiet. Sometimes, I said, quiet is the only way healing sticks. She asked if she could come by next weekend. Said she had something she wanted to show me. I agreed. After the call, I walked out to the garden. The tomatoes were bright and red, nearly ready for harvest. And the zinnias? They were blooming again. The morning Sharon came back. The air smelled like early fall, earthy and soft, with a hint of something turning beneath the surface. She arrived just after 10, wearing jeans, a denim jacket, and carrying a canvas tote bag. She looked settled. Not in the way people look when everything is perfect, but in the way they do when they've stopped running from themselves. I brought something, she said, stepping into the kitchen. She pulled a small, framed document from her bag and placed it on the table. It was a certificate. Completion of Restorative Justice Mediation, State of North Carolina. Participant, Sharon Mitchell. Outcome. Reconciliation process initiated and completed. I picked it up slowly, my fingers brushing the embossed seal. It's not just paper, she said, her voice steady. It was hours of sitting with victims of financial abuse, listening, admitting, learning what it means to own harm without excuses. I didn't speak, just stared at the words. I didn't want to show it to you for praise, she added. I wanted to show it to you because I promised to keep showing up, and this is part of that. We sat at the table for a long time. She didn't fidget. I didn't cry. Eventually, I poured us both coffee. I started teaching again, I told her. Small class at the senior center, basic container gardening. Most of them just want an excuse to get their hands in the dirt. She smiled. That sounds perfect. It is, I said. And they're good people. One woman grows bell peppers in a bird bath. She laughed. Resourceful. I told them about you, I added. About what happened. Her smile faded. Not all the details, I said quickly. Just enough to say you're part of why I'm there, why I teach now, why I started again. Sharon looked down at her mug. I don't deserve that kind of grace, she said. No, I replied. You don't. But none of us do. That's why it matters when we're given it anyway. Outside, a breeze rattled the chimes she'd hung months ago. They sounded like rain on glass. We spent the afternoon harvesting tomatoes. She took half home in a basket lined with a dish towel I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. The other half I dropped off at the church for the food pantry. That evening, I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the sky turn amber. I thought about Don, about the way he used to hum as he peeled potatoes, about how he would have handled all of this. He would have forgiven sooner. But I forgave deeper. I opened my notebook for the last time and wrote, "This isn't the story I expected to tell. It's not neat. It's not easy. But it's mine. And like every good garden, it grew out of something broken, watered by truth, and tended with love, until the roots held strong again." I closed the notebook and let the silence be enough. This story is a reminder that betrayal can come from the people we love most, but so can redemption. It teaches us that forgiveness is not about forgetting the pain, but about choosing not to let it define us. Healing doesn't happen in one moment. It unfolds slowly, through honesty, boundaries, and small acts of love. Even when trust is shattered, growth is still possible. With time, truth, and grace, even the most broken families can begin again.